Hello and welcome back to WhitTips. In this video we're going to be looking at the use of sentences within our creative writing, paying particular attention to the subject of our sentences in the hope that that will improve our accuracy and demarcation and how we vary our sentences within our descriptions or narratives or whatever it is that we're being asked to write in lessons or for assessments. So why are sentences important within our creative writing? Well, first of all, there's nothing more frustrating for a student or for a teacher or for an examiner or for anybody reading a piece of writing when there is some really good ideas, lovely imagery in there, beautiful description. It's a really well-crafted piece of writing in terms of all the techniques and the methods that's in there, and then the sentence control is not quite right, and therefore sense is lost and is not communicated how you would want it to be, and it ends up costing you valuable marks, comprehension as well. So it's very important that we make sure that the good ideas that we have manage to find their way down to the page with the right words, the right vocabulary, the right imagery, but also in an order on the page that helps the examiner or the reader or the teacher make sense of it, and it's easy for them to read and digest, and that all comes through our control of sentences. As you can see from the mark scheme, sentences come under assessment objective 6, which is all about your technical accuracy, which is a kind of like your spelling, your punctuation and your grammar. And sentences are part of your grammar because they're part of the rules of language in order how things go. There's set rules to sentences, and you might hear this word or see this word in lessons or on examination websites. Sentence demarcation is a very posh and a very long way of saying how you mark off your sentences. Sentence demarcation is, do you know where your sentences begin and do you know where your sentences end, and is that consistent throughout your work? And if it is, then you should be moving your way up that mark scheme. Sentences and your use of sentences appears more than just in this one bullet point for technical accuracy, and we'll talk about some of the other bullet points later on. But first of all, it is really about trying to control your beginning and your ending of your sentences and understanding where they start and stop. And if you can do that, then your marks will go up as long as you're putting those other features in. Remember what we've said in past videos, writing is not just doing one thing well in isolation, it's bringing all these skills together, and that's why it's so difficult. So let's just remind ourselves then of the different sentence types that we've got. So a simple sentence, let's start with that. A simple sentence has two things, a subject and a verb. So there's different variants of simple sentences, but for the purposes of this is as simple as it gets. This is a short and a simple as a sentence you can build within English language. And if you look at this first example, it says, he cried. So the subject's in blue, the verb, the action is in black, bold and underlined, and you can see here, he cried. Subject, verb, person, action. Okay, if you look at the other two, the girl laughed, a tree fell, exactly the same structure to them. Yes, they've got different determiners in front of them, but a key here for you controlling your sentences is watching out when you're writing. If you're someone that struggles with sentences, watching out where you add in new nouns and new pronouns within your writing, and thinking consciously as you're writing them down, is this a new thing that I'm saying when I introduce this noun or pronoun? Do I need to demarcate it some way? Do I need to finish that last sentence to move on to this sentence? And that will hopefully try and help you when you start to think about where your subject is. And like I said, the subject is often a noun or a pronoun. So have a look for them. It's easy in these simple sentences, but as we go on and you see these sentences develop, hopefully you'll understand why we're starting with something so very basic as this. And as a little challenge for you, have a go at writing a full piece just using very short, simple sentences like this, and really start to control and then start to add other things back in. What we do sometimes as students is we think we can write, we think complexly, so we try to write complexly, and it doesn't always work out like that. Sometimes you have to strip it back a little bit and take it back to its basics to make sure that you get your full meaning across. So what you will notice on this slide then is those three simple sentences. He cried, the girl laughed, a tree fell. have all been turned from simple sentences into complex sentences in quite a simple manner. And that's because I know where my subject is. So just to remind us before we start, a complex sentence has a main clause, which is a simple sentence, subject and a verb, and a subordinate clause. And the subordinate clause, or your teachers might refer to it as an additional clause, an embedded clause, and a verbal clause. They are dependent upon your main subject, the he, the girl, a tree. That's why they're so important. So once you know where they are, when you start to add things in that's extra, that don't necessarily that relates to the subject, this main verb, then it needs to be punctuated. And that's where sometimes we lose sense, or we lose marks, or we don't get marks potentially for not punctuating correctly. So if you have a look at this first sentence now, I've added in an introductory clause with that. Again, people might refer to these as things like discourse markers. They add a fluency to your writing. So without notice, he cried. So I've added in that little bit there. Because it's added in about my subject, I've separated it off with a comma. I can take it out. I don't necessarily need it in there. It's additional, and it's there to add in that little bit more information that about his crying. There's no notice to it. He's just started. As the second example, you can see here, I've still got the girl laughed, my simple sentence. But what I've added in here is what your teachers will refer to as an embedded clause. So the girl, comma, who was watching the boy cry, laughed. Again, I can take that completely out if I don't want to, and I know where I need to put it in. Okay, so I'm going to add in a little bit more about the girl and what's making her laugh. Put it between two commas. I could put it between two dashes here if I wanted to. Put it in brackets, in parentheses if I wanted it to here as well. Okay, so you can start to vary your punctuation through this as well. So you could put them before your subject and your verb. You could put them in between your subject and your main verb, and you can put them, as you can see in the last one, at the end. So we've still got our simple sentence: a tree fell, comma, causing chaos throughout the forest floor. So once you start to master where your subject is and your main verb in those simple sentences, then you can start to make minor adjustments, and you'll start to learn in your writing the more you practice this, and get a feel for how these different sentences flow and work together. And you think, you know what, I might just want to I've been writing for a little bit now. I do need, as I read back through my work, to put in a sentence that's got an embedded clause in there, and you know where it needs to go. Your embedded clause goes between your subject and your main verb, and you're used to writing these as well. So again, have a bit of a practice. If you've done a piece of writing where you've only used those very basic sentence forms on the last examples we looked at, then have a go now at developing some of them and adding things in different places. That's important within your sentence. Sometimes at the beginning, before the subject and the verb, sometimes in between the subject and the main verb, and sometimes at the end of that main verb as well. Okay, so you can start to play around and move additional pieces of information within your sentences and still keeping them controlled, because you still know where your subject is and where your main verb is. So you can still easily start with your capitals. Make sure you finish with those full stops as well, and you're controlling everything in between those two things. The next sentence types that we've got, because they're often linked together: simple, complex, and compound sentences. So if we have a look, same idea here, same hack if you will. We're still looking for where our subjects appear. So just to remind you, a compound sentence is two simple sentences that's joined together through a coordinating conjunction. Coordinating conjunctions, I've put down the left-hand side for you here. You might remember this from Key Stage 2 and your primary school teachers telling you about fanboys. So coordinating conjunctions are for, and, no, but, or, yet, so, and they act like a pivot between two simple sentences. So you can take these out if you want to, and I'll talk more about these and using semicolon in another video. But they join two equally weighted sentences. Like, say, imagine like a pivot on a seesaw, or you've got equal weighting on both sides. It's not one side up, one side down. So if you have a look at these sentences, these examples, I've still got my three original examples: he cried, the girl laughed, a tree fell. But you can see I'm adding in an equally weighted simple sentence on the other side of it. He cried, so the teacher helped him. The girl laughed, for she found the whole thing quite amusing. A tree fell, and the man's work was done. new subjects in the first and third example. In the second one, you can see it's the same, it's linked in terms of subject, the girl, and then she. I've used in the second part of that sentence there. I just changed the pronoun, but again, you're looking he, the teacher, the girl, she, a tree, the man. As you introduce these new nouns and these new pronouns, then you need to be thinking, how do I punctuate it? These don't need commas. There's no need to put a comma in any of these sentences. So try to avoid using commas with coordinating conjunctions, but that only works if you're thinking about what's coming after it. Okay, so that's where this idea of subjects are very important. Once you understand your subjects within your sentences, where they come and what verb they're attached to, then it will become a lot easier for you to be accurate with your writing as well. And then you can move on to consider perhaps more advanced things that you can add into sentences then. Okay, so just a reminder for you, simple, complex, compound sentences. If you need to go back and watch them and get the definitions again, do so. But let's have a look at them now within a piece of writing and see the effect that these can have in improving our writing for examinations and within class. So a little brief for you here, then you can have a go at practicing this yourself. You can stop, press pause now and have a go at describing a firework display. So here we have an attempt at describing a firework display. I'll read this to you. The night was cold. We stood. We waited. A spark flashed in front of us. A sound travelled upwards. The sky erupted. The fireworks unleashed colour after colour on the night's black canvas. It was truly spectacular. Now, there's nothing wrong with these sentences. These are all grammatically correct sentences. And hopefully, as you look at this and you listen to this and you read this, you can see and hear that it's very repetitive and there's not much variation to it. I've got in there some nice things. I've got a bit of repetition in there. I've got some metaphor in there. I've got some personification in there as well. So it's quite nice and it works quite well in terms of its methods and it's accurate, but it's not very varied. And that's where learning to where your subjects come will help you to vary your work a little bit more. So sentences, just to go back now to the importance of sentences, to look at another bullet point. The next bullet point in terms of sentences is about using a full range. So looking back at those sentences, there wasn't a full range. They were all simple sentences that all started with the subject. The night, as you can see, we, a spark, a sound, the sky, the fireworks, they all start with the subject and they're all followed then by the main verb. So there's no variation to them. There's not a full range of sentences. So I'm not being able to move up in terms of my technical accuracy because I'm too repetitive and just keep using the same sentence structure all the time, although it's accurate. So it's okay to be accurate, but this is where you've got to start to improve and draft and work on your writing to make sure that it's not only accurate and precise in terms of how you demarcate your sentences, but that you can show off to your examiner and to your teachers by using a full range of sentence forms and thinking then, your next steps, which type of sentence for what point I'm trying to make, and that's where you start to craft your effects as well. Do I need a complex sentence? Am I trying to add in lots of detail? Do I need a short sentence with some kind of dramatic impact? And that will be where you start to craft them for effect as well. So if you have a look then at the next example that's underneath here, this is where I've added in. So hopefully the colours there as a visual representation so that you can see it's not just black and blue like the top one, but there's a lot more red on here and a little bit of purple as well. So let's listen to the difference in this second example that we've got. The night was cold. We stood and waited, excited for what was about to unfold. Suddenly, a spark flashed in front of us. A sound travelled upwards, taking our gaze with it. Then the sky erupted. Like artists mad with fury, the fireworks unleashed colour after colour on the night's black canvas. Without doubt, it was truly spectacular. So you can hear the difference. I'm essentially saying the same thing, but I'm adding in a little bit more detail. I'm joining things together to create a different rhythm that's the important part of it. Your sentences should create a kind of a rhythm, and as you read it, you should be able to emphasize that. And that's very important, that you read things that you write in your head or aloud if you can, to try and understand where emphasis is needed, and where things and additions are needed, and where things need to be cut back. That's very important. And listen to people read as well. That will also help you. But you're trying to create a rhythm with your sentences. So the second one there has got much more rise and fall within it, much more variation, and hopefully flows a little bit more, rather than the kind of robotic first example. So have a go, keep practicing, keep moving things round within your sentences, and you can only do that if you know where your subject and your main verb is, and that's a very important thing. And you can still see them in here, the blue and the black bold underlines, still my subject and verb, and you can see their different sentence lengths, different sentence types, adding things in different places, embedded clauses, introductory clauses, subordinate clauses coming after my main verb, all adds to the variation for it. So if I go back to that mark scheme, there is no way that an examiner or a teacher can't say to me that I'm not using a full range of appropriate sentences, and that I'm not also demarcating my sentences correctly and accurately. So keep practicing, because that's all you can do to improve your writing. And if there's any questions, pop a comment underneath, and I'll try to respond to you. Good luck. Thank you. Goodbye.